So I'm going to briefly present the team. Currently, this is what our team looks like in Luxembourg. I'm the head of IT. I still have involvement in the web archive because the web archiving technical part is part of the IT department. We have Laszlo, who's also at the conference, who has presented a lot of stuff about our Solar Wayback, our browser tricks, who is the software engineer. And then we have BnL's, who's the digital curator, who takes part of the care of the collection department, and who I'm very, very thankful for because he actually made the slides while I was on holidays. So yeah, and he should have been here as well, and hopefully next year he'll be at the next location, which is still secret apparently. So I'm not going to bore you with the details of our evolution, but as a web archive, but there are a couple of things which are important in the history. We started in 2004. There was a new law for the library, and that law included a theoretical provision to do web harvesting as part of a legal deposit. So there were a couple of studies done over the years, and then in 2009 there was the Grand Ducal Decree, which put everything into practice. As part of that decree, we gave the ministry a list of, well, our wish list is we would like to have 4 people who do this. If that's not possible, 2 people. If that's not possible, at least 1 person. So, of course, we got 0 persons. So, unfortunately, we couldn't really start, even though we had a legal mandate. And in 2015, we had a possibility that maybe somebody would be able to start in a later date. There was nothing concrete. So we restarted the whole project. 2016, we were quite sure that a year after somebody would be able to start. So we just said, okay, we have to start web archiving now. And we didn't have people to do it. We only had a bit of budget. So, and that's a bit the evolution of our web archive. We had easier access to budget than to people, and that's why we went with tenders, and that's why I'm presenting this here. And so in 2017, Ben joined us, and then in 2022, Laszlo joined us, and in the meantime, we have done 2 public tenders for web archiving. What do we do? Like most national libraries, we do domain crawls. At the beginning 2 times per year, now 4 times per year, and that also enters into why public tenders. We do event collections, and we do thematic collections. Like one of our thematic collections that you might have heard in Laszlo's session is the browser-based crawling of the news sites in Luxembourg. And we, at the beginning when we started, we needed to have all these 3 types of crawls done by an external organization because we didn't have tools inside the library to do it. We started in 2016 with crawling through the Internet Archive, just on a contractual basis, and we continued that until 2020. And 2020, something happened which I'm sure nobody wants to remember, but it basically meant that there was a higher urgency for harvesting websites, and it wasn't possible anymore to just go around selecting 5 websites there, 10 websites there, because everything was impacted. And so we managed to convince management to give us the budget to do 1 additional crawl because, yeah, everything was happening so quickly. And so we did 3 crawls in 2020. And then in 2021, we're like, yeah, the situation is continuing. This is not something that was a one-off. So we need to find a way to continue doing this. But unfortunately, our law on public spending in Luxembourg, is probably the same in other countries, means that if you give a certain company a certain budget over a certain amount of time, you are required to do a public tender. You cannot just do it like this, and you cannot just buy a service. And that makes sense because public administration should be fair towards private companies. Like there should not be unfair competition where like one civil servant decides that this is all going to KPMG and not to Ernst & Young or something like this. But of course, with web archiving, it's a bit more complicated because there are not 1,000 companies doing it. And it's also a very, very narrow field. However, yeah, we didn't have a choice, so we did our public tender, and the public tender was the way to go forward with those 4 crawls per year. So in terms of timing, we needed to be relatively short because we had those crawls that were going on a one-off basis every 3 months previously. And we needed to do something which would be able to take the relay. And the company which was going to win the contract had to have an existing web archiving operation. So I'm seeing Ilya is taking notes. So basically the idea was that we don't want a company who's just winning the contract and developing their solution from scratch, because that is always a difficulty in IT contracting. We wanted to have internal and external autonomy. So we wanted to have things done by us where we can go out and say, this website is important today, we want to do that now. But we also want to have all the all the things that can be planned on the side of the service provider. So the domain harvests they're always a bit similar. It's like there's something that a service provider can do. There's recurring crawls for our news media sites, which the service provider can take care of. That's very quantifiable, and the other things are harder to quantify. And then, yeah, as part of the administrative stuff of public tenders, I'm sure that some part of this audience is a bit afraid of public tenders, and I understand that because they can be overwhelming. But there's the administrative part, there's the technical part, and then there's the content part. I mean, the administrative part is usually done by lawyers and by accountants or things like this. In that sense, I'm quite fortunate because as part of the digitization activities, which I was doing before, I had quite a good overview of the process in Luxembourg. So this was not a big issue, but that's the first hurdle that you need to pass. And you usually, in an organization, you pass it by talking to the people who do public tenders all the time. Because everybody has that, it's the law in most countries, and some unit is doing that. And then the technical bits, well, we had to see what other organizations were actually asking for in their technical tenders. And then finally, the content side, I mean, that was what do we actually want? And there, it's the decisions that you have to do. We wanted to have everything in one package. We didn't want to have 3 different contractors for the 3 different elements, which is an issue because our 3 different elements were a bit different. And so the 3 main services we asked for, it goes a bit to the 3 types of crawls we do, but it doesn't match one-to-one. So the 4 annual domain crawls, we just put it in the data in what we actually got from Internet Archive previously, and we did some projection. We tried to get a maximum which was acceptable to us and which we thought was reasonable. The ad hoc crawls, that seems very abstract when I say a self-service crawl management platform. But when you write a tender, you cannot say that you want the car which has a star in front of the car. You have to say, you have to describe that you want a car. And self-service crawl management platform is obviously something like Archiveit or, I mean, now Browsertrix Cloud, Conifer, something like this. Certain type of capacity. And then we had the news media crawls where we basically delegated the work to the tenderer, so they needed to be able to do the quality assurance on that. And for the domain crawl, basically the scoping is like most domain crawls, like everything at a top-level domain and embedded resources, things like this. For the crawl management platform, that was a bit harder to make it generic in a way that still allowed us to present it with all the functionality that we needed. So the way we did it was we actually looked at several management platforms that were in the open or that other libraries were using, and we tried to get all the elements that we thought we needed. So this is just a small extract of the specifications that we wrote for that, but it's not huge. It's, I think, 2 pages of text, which describes what we want to do with it. And then, yeah, that's for the ad hoc crawls. And then finally, the news media crawls, that's around 50 websites, either daily, weekly, or monthly. And then the tenderer has to do quality assurance on that. One thing we also had was IP-based whitelisting. We wanted to have that so that we could tell the publishers, this is our IP from our crawler. We have legal deposit. Please open up your paywall to this IP address. And in the end, we didn't manage to get that working with Internet Archive, but yeah, it's a more complicated story. We can talk about it later if you're interested. The technical requirements, as I mentioned, we didn't invent them from scratch. We were very fortunate, Corinne is here from the OPE, to get technical requirements from the OPE, but also from the Library of Congress. That was very nice. And in the meantime, there are more libraries, and of course also our specifications can be had. So if somebody's interested in doing a tender, just ask us and we can provide them. Because it gives you a very good idea of the process to come to this set of 20 criteria or something that you're using to evaluate the different options that you're given. Because yeah, I mean, you don't know who's going to bid for the contract, and there might be companies who you like, other companies whose product you think is not so good, so you need to have a good set of criteria. We also wanted, as part of the tender response, that the tenderer tells us exactly which crawlers they're using and all the capabilities of their crawlers, because we saw that as a distinguishing factor between some of the providers. So in that sense, having a knowledge of the market is also quite important. I mean, but of course, we got the knowledge of the markets through talking to other libraries, talking to the service providers themselves. So it's just a bit of figuring out. Okay, thank you. We wanted to focus on deduplication because deduplication just means that our data is smaller. So that was something that we wanted from the company. And have previous experience. As I mentioned, it's very important to not get somebody who's just developing everything from scratch. This is our our criteria table in the end that will depend on the country, in each country, and what you're able to set. In Luxembourg, you can go as low as 30% of the criteria set by price. We want to remain at 50. So experience is a big chunk, technical capabilities of the tools, and IP-based crawling and deduplication. And was awarded to Internet Archive. So yeah, so the conclusions from the first tender were basically that IP-based crawling was something that we couldn't get to work. It was both a bit more difficult from the Internet Archive side than also from the publisher side. They didn't want to trust Internet Archive's IP address. And we didn't use everything that our whole archived budget. And for the news media behind paywall, if you have attended Laszlo's session, you know that we're using browser tricks on a local instance, and that permits us to have our own IP address from Luxembourg, from the Luxembourg state, and our publishers are way happier with that one. We did a second public tender in 2023, last year, so that was even easier. I think we wrote a total of 1.5 days on the tender document. We just did some updates with regards to the law. We took all the other criteria that we had. We just dropped IP-based harvesting. And it was awarded again to Internet Archive. But there was an interest of, I think there were 20 companies which were interested. And I'm going to skip this. Oh, no, that was actually my last slide, so I still have time to do that, if I manage to go back. Okay. So one thing that is a bit dangerous with tenders is that you're not sure that you get continuity between the different providers. So we had to start relatively early in the tendering process in case there was a handover at some point. We're very happy that we got Internet Archive both times, because there is the added benefit that our collection is also available in archive.org, which is not something that we can ask for technically in the tender because, yeah, copyright reasons and stuff like this. And yeah, I talked about transparency and the calendar. That's important, yeah. So thank you very much, and the floor is open for questions.